Hi, I'm Peter Capaldi. I play the Doctor, and you're watching EMS Productions.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This week I'm going to be looking back at the first part of Peter Harness's Zygon two-parter, the Zygon Invasion. So we have the Zygon Invasion, the third proper appearance of the Zygons in Doctor Who after the Terror of the Zygons in 1975, I think, probably, about there, and the Day of the Doctor obviously in 2013 for the 50th anniversary special. And so I think that they have a lot of potential as an alien, sort of different to a lot of aliens that you get because of the sort of duplication and cloning stuff, and obviously it makes it quite cheap for them to use because they can just keep them all as humans for most of the episodes and not have to spend anything on alien costumes. So that's probably, it's a fairly cheap monster to make really, and having a story which is which is probably good for Doctor Who and for the BBC making it. But in terms of this episode, it's essentially, as Stephen Moffat says, a sequel to The Day of the Doctor, but it's kind of a sequel to the bit you might have forgotten about from The Day of the Doctor, if you like, which is why they needed to have the recap at the beginning of the episode, and I think it worked very well, giving you, like, I don't know, just over a minute quick recap of exactly sort of the plot point of the Zygon of the Day of the Doctor. You've probably forgotten unless you're a proper fan. Like casual fans will just remember, oh, the Doctor saved Gallifrey, oh, John Hurt was in it, David Tennant was in it, and that's about all they'll remember. And it's unlikely that a lot of people would remember the Zygons were really in it. And so it was good that they just quickly, in a minute, at the start of the episode, recapped what happened, what was the situation in terms of sort of setting up this peace treaty and this kind of thing. So we're all up to speed with who the characters are, the two Osgoods obviously. Maybe they should have chucked a shot in of Osgood being killed, but then that's kind of explained in the next scene, so I guess it didn't matter too much. But and then we get into the episode, which kind of starts off with another set of explanations, if you like, and a recap of how the peace treaty was set out, how it exactly works, because, well, we didn't actually know anything about it up until this episode, really. We just sort of were left to assume that they sorted something out at the end of Day of the Doctor. But now we finally get that explanation about how 20 million, I think it is, Zygons are living among us, which is, of course, all this political commentary and stuff, which I'll mention a little bit later on. But yeah, it just, so that first scene with the two Osgoods, when we still had two Osgoods, but then we end with two Osgoods, so we kind of still have two Osgoods. But we didn't for a week have two Osgoods. Actually, no. Oh, I'm just going to stop on that point now because I've kind of messed that up. But yeah, we had the two Osgoods explaining, I was trying to work out which Osgood is the human Osgood of those two, and I think it's the one with the Tom Baker scarf, because when they said something about each like race, Zygon and human, and one of them said Zygon, one of them says human, and I imagine they'd say the reverse of what they actually are, and so I think that's the Osgood with the Tom Baker scarf at that point in time was the human Osgood. Was she then the one who, I think she must have, so that means that actually Osgood in this episode is Zygon Osgood then, okay. Yeah, my logic, there we go. My theory for today, that it was Zygon Osgood all the way through, and it was actually the real Osgood was the one killed in Death in Heaven. Purely speculative, I don't think we've had any proper explanation of who the real Osgood is, so there we go, that's my guess, if you like, for what it is. But so that nicely sets it up, and then the Doctor appears. So the Doctor first appears, rocking out on his guitar in the TARDIS yet again, after we've just seen Osgood getting attacked and by a Zygon and zapped, because Zygons have now developed this magical zapping ability that can just sort of either knock out or kill people depending on how they're feeling, it would seem, with this magical blue light, which you can turn them into a sort of a dirt ball, if you like. They can just sort of do that if they're so inclined to do so, then they can. But then we get the Doctor rocking out on his guitar in the TARDIS. We get, it's the nightmare scenario. This is a disaster. Everything's going to end. Oh no. And well, we get a few nice comical moments early on with Dr. Disco, and which I quite like as a nickname. Of course, you've got Dr. Funkenstein as well. I'm sure they're references to something, but I don't know what. I can't remember what they were. But that's just nice. Throwing in the odd little joke and nickname. I don't have any problem with that. I don't see why there needs to be any problem with that. It's just the Doctor having a little bit of a joke, a bit of fun. That's always good. That's no problems with that. And I like Clara's voicemail message as well. Very subtle with the "I'm probably on the tube or in outer space." Very subtle there. Very subtle about what she does. So you want to, you hope that's just for the Doctor, that voicemail, because, well, just, yeah, not too subtle. And when we get Clara for the first time, who's only actually Clara for all of 2 minutes really in this episode, well, really of pretty much the whole of the 2 parts, we only get about 2 minutes of actual Clara, which is where, as I've mentioned the last couple of weeks about her being underused in this series, although you got lots of Jenna Coleman, you don't actually have any of Clara in this episode really, do you? You just have that first minute and a half or so where she randomly gets off her bike because apparently she just has a motorbike permanently now that she rides whenever she likes, because why not, she can, I guess. And then she goes and gets knocked out and duplicated by Zygons. And, well, I was a bit useless and stupid in this, that I didn't realise it. When I watched it the first time round, back in when it aired in October, I think. End of October, was it? Or maybe it was the very beginning of November, somewhere around there. That I didn't realise it. I didn't realise initially that she was a Zygon duplicate. I thought that was still a real Clara for a fair point. And so that's pretty poor on my part. And well, one always random question that I had was, has Clara actually memorised Trivial Pursuit questions to try and win? Because it was a slightly random moment where Bonnie lets the Doctor know that, yeah, she knows about Truth and Consequences in New Mexico just because she's obsessed with Trivial Pursuit. So does that mean that actually Clara is? Or is this just some sort of weird thing that Bonnie the Zygon likes to memorise Trivial Pursuit questions? I guess that's how it is, clearly. Bonnie loves her Trivial Pursuit. Must be the case. But yeah, so I was a bit useless with not realising that she was not Clara anymore and that she was actually a Zygon. Although I do think they did a really good job with just the subtle change of hairstyle to really differentiate between the two. Obviously we don't really see the two together in this episode, but when you do see the two together, they do look like different characters. They don't look like exactly the same. Like the Osgoods, obviously they're wearing different outfits, but they do kind of look exactly the same. But Clara and Bonnie are wearing the same clothes, but you can still tell they're different just from a simple, slightly different hairstyle. So I think that's well done. And it was clearly a hint there when she changes her hair, a hint to us that actually, yeah, she might not be the actual Clara. Just we don't realise that yet. So there we go. I'm just a bit slow clearly when watching Doctor Who to try and pick up whether she's a Zygon or not. And well, I should talk about Osgood, seeing as she's one of the major characters of this episode. Got her in the background here, just nervously staring out of the TV in the DVD menu. Or episodes, because I literally watched this episode just before reviewing it. I don't usually do that, it's usually overnight, but yeah, I kind of finished watching it 15 minutes ago, so my thoughts are very fresh on this episode. And well, Osgood, she's an alright. I don't have strong opinions either way with Osgood, to be honest. She's quite a nice character. Yeah, she's sort of a big fan of the Doctor, if you like, and she's fairly smart, and obviously is the whole sort of, it's the integral part of the whole Zygon peace treaty and this kind of stuff, and the Osgood boxes obviously that we get in part 2 mainly, and this sort of thing. So she's important in that sense. But I don't find that, oh, she's the most amazing character ever, or oh, I absolutely hate her because she cosplay. I don't have a problem with her doing a cosplay of the Doctor. I don't see why people need to moan about that. That's not going to put people off the character. Well, it might put grumpy fans off, but I've seen some people saying it'll put the casual audience off the character. No, it won't. I don't see how that's the case. It's just an outfit that, if it's someone who's watching the show who hasn't seen any of the classics, they're not going to know that it's cosplay of one of the previous Doctors. It's just a costume for them until the Doctor obviously mentions it, but it's not really an issue, I don't think. So the cosplay's nice little nod. It was lovely. It was great in Day of the Doctor as well, obviously, to have the sort of the Tom Baker scarf and everything and bring that back as well. Bit of 5th Doctor to go with it, and I think we get 7th Doctor at the end of the second part, I believe, don't we? Something like that. And so it's just a nice nod. It's nothing over the top. I don't feel like it is, because I've seen some people sort of saying that it's too fan servicey and over the top to have a fan effectively in the show, but I don't think that's a problem. Personally, I think that it's just a nice little nod to the past. I don't think it needs to be. It's not made a big thing out of it. Yes, she's a fan of the Doctor, but it's not made a big thing. Oh, you're wearing the Doctor's clothes. Oh, that's a bit strange. Oh, let's make this a big plot point. It's just an outfit that she likes to wear. So, don't complain about it, it's fine. But Osgood's a solid character, just I'm not generally too bothered either way about her. If she comes back after this episode, I'm fine with that, but I'm not clambering for it like some people seem to, or at least were at the time. They're like, oh, we need her back next series, she's got to come back. I'm sure she will at some point, and I wouldn't be too surprised if she came back, at least for a cameo in Moffat's last series, just because it's Moffat's last series and Osgood is a Moffat character, so I can see her coming back for something in that, but you never know, or maybe they'll leave it for a few years. It's hard to say, really. But yeah, so that's pretty much my thoughts on Osgood in general, but in terms of this episode, obviously there's only one of them left now, pretty much. Well, for most of other than the opening sequence, which is a bit in the past, if you like, because it's recorded, obviously. But for this episode, she's kind of... We all want to know whether she's a Zygon or a human, but she just won't tell us. She won't tell the Doctor. She just... Apparently it's not important, even though that's the only thing we want to know. And at the end of the second part, they says, like, oh, you'll probably find out somewhen. And it's just like Moffat saying, oh yeah, we're not going to tell you today, we probably won't ever tell you, but we'll give you a little tease to make you come back and watch again and keep doing fan theories over it and trying to find out. I'm sure that's just the way that Moffat loves to write it. Although, yeah, because that was Moffat. It was co-written by Moffat, wasn't it, the second part, so it could have been a Moffat line. Who knows, really? There you go, Day of the Doctor reference. Well, the actual Zygons in this episode, we don't really see that many of them, to be honest. You get... Well, in terms of seeing Zygons as actual Zygons, clearly it's to save costs, as I mentioned at the beginning, and, well, there's only one shot of actual Zygons changing from a human into a Zygon. Clearly it cost them so much money to do that they wanted to try and minimise that as much as possible. And so we only see it in that little recorded clip of the two little children who are actually Zygon commanders or something, who are zapped back into normal form and then brutally killed, because yeah, that's how we roll on Doctor Who now. We just brutally kill aliens for fun, pretty much. And well, it's clearly sending a message, and so that's sort of where the Zygons were slightly disappointing in this episode. It's just you don't see enough of them in their normal form. You see a lot of sort of dupe of these human-based Zygons. I mean, you get the one over in Truth and Consequences. She's the policewoman, and they clearly purposely pan away from her when she's about to transform into a Zygon, so they don't have to spend the money on the effect for a Zygon. It just pans down to Kate, and then pans back up to now she's a Zygon, and it's just kind of like, come on, put a bit more budget in and give us a proper shot of them changing, because we hardly ever see that. So that's a little bit disappointing. But in terms of the actual Zygon sort of being written, well, you've got to give, I think I need to start awarding this on a weekly basis of campy/hammy performance of the week. And this week it goes to Zygon number 2 on the plane, who has the extremely hammy line of "We want the worlds," just the way he does it with his hissing sounds, "We want the worlds," and this extremely campy, hammy voice that he has on it, and he plays it. It's such a slightly cringy and interesting performance, but it didn't quite work out, I think, and it's sort of, yeah, going a little bit much with the over-the-top performance there. And so clearly after, well, now 2 weeks ago we had Odin and his over-the-top campy performance. We're now awarding it to Zygon number 2, as I'm going to call him, because he doesn't have a name, I don't think. And he just didn't give his name, did he? Zygon number 2 on the plane. There we go. He wins Camp of the Week. There you go. EMS is Camp of the Week. That's got to be my award of the week now, because, well, where can we go back and look through the series so far to award it? I guess you could award it to Prentice in Before the Flood. Under the Lake, you haven't really got anybody there. I guess there's not enough characters. Which is familiar, again, not enough characters. And The Magician's Apprentice, Colony Soft, kinda comes on that, not quite, I guess, in my categories of campy performances. So yeah, there's a few in there, and you could give it to Lenny the Lion from Woman Who Lived. I guess he was an interesting performance, I think it's fair to say, in The Woman Who Lived. So yeah, there's some opportunities for awards there. Clearly I'm going to have to start EMS awards now, because I just have. Okay, well, so generally the Zygons are pretty poor in this episode. They kind of don't really do much. They just look menacing with their teeth and start hissing, and grab a couple of kids and run off with them, and that's about all we see of the Zygons in this episode. So, not much else to say this week. I can't remember if they do much more next week. I have a feeling they're a bit underused and just not well written overall. But you never know, they might appear better to me next week. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? Now, on the sort of one other part of the story is the truth or consequences line/place/thing, I guess, which I think is a really nice sort of idea. It's a line that fits very well with the Zygons, aka ISIS. The Zygons will, well, I'll come to political commentary a bit later on. But yeah, for the Zygon sort of splinter group, I think they were called, they have their sort of catchphrase of truth or consequences, which makes perfect sense in the story, where they want to be able to reveal themselves, the truth, or face the consequences of essentially war. And so that's quite nice, and clearly it perfectly links into the town truth or consequences, where the Zygons came and killed everyone and kind of took over the place, but there wasn't really anybody there too much, was there? There was like that policewoman, Kate, when she went, and that was it. So there wasn't really too much going on there, so I can't remember quite why they invaded that place and took it over. Maybe it was a trap or something, I don't know, I can't remember. Even though I just watched it, I don't really know. So there you go. But truth and consequences is a nice idea, and a nice relevant catchphrase, if you like, slogan I guess would be a better word, for the Zygon Splinter Group. Well, I might as well give a mention to the political themes and ideas presented in this, where quite clearly this Zygon Splinter Group are meant to be represented as a sort of radicalised ISIS-style group, and it was very relevant at the time, of course, with these episodes coming out right around the Paris attacks back in November. I think it was only like a week or two before they happened that these aired, and so they sort of became relevant. I know obviously it's for the second part, but that speech was kind of shared around so much on that night, I remember on Twitter and stuff, all about it. And so this episode really sort of presents that, and the idea of, it's obviously expanded a lot more in the second part, but this idea that most of the Zygons just want to live peacefully as they are, but you've just got these few that sort of war hungry, if you like, who aren't happy to just live as humans, and they want to sort of cause chaos and get back their freedom supposedly when they don't really need it. And so that's kind of, and doing what they believe is right to try and get back what they feel they deserve, even though they don't really. And so they kind of sort of look, I can't get my words out, kind of represents, what's the word? Is an allegory, that's the word, for these sort of radicalised groups that we get in the world today. And so it's kind of interesting, sort of going almost 1970 early Pertwee era style with the political themes that they're bringing into this episode, which is, well, I'm a big fan of the Pertwee era, not necessarily for the political themes, that kind of just comes with it, but it's a very enjoyable era of the show. And I think this sort of episode is kind of harking back to that a little bit, with this sort of political commentary on radicalisation in general, really, and how small groups can cause sort of so much chaos and carnage and try to sort of destroy the whole piece in this situation, obviously. And so, well, clearly I'll talk a bit more about this next week once we get the complete picture, because I can't remember it all. I haven't seen Inversion probably since November last year, so that's like 6 months ago now since I last watched it. So although I've seen the speech since then, I haven't seen the rest of the episode, so I need to sort of refresh myself on the rest of that. So I'll talk a lot more about that part of the story next week. And so it's always good for Doctor Who sort of tackling bigger themes, showing it's a grown-up show, not just for little kids, tackling these kind of things, even if it's just a little fairly subtle, although it kind of wasn't particularly subtle in this episode. But it's nice that they're doing that kind of thing in the show nowadays. Wrapping up a few other things on the episode, we had Rebecca Front in it, from formerly starring alongside Peter Capaldi in the thick of it, as she was Nicola Murray, wasn't she, the minister or something for Department of Social Affairs and Citizenship. Great. If you are 18 and over and haven't seen it, go watch the thick of it, because it is an absolutely fantastic show. Extremely funny, extremely full of swearing and stuff, so don't watch it if you're like 12 and you're watching, or 13 if you're watching this video. Do not watch it unless you're... yeah, just don't watch it, because it's pretty strong language throughout. But it's a very entertaining programme, and, well, they play off, Peter Capaldi and Rebecca Front play off each other very well in the episode, in the series, sorry. really struggling with words today for some reason. Don't really know why. A bit strange. And well, she gets a role in this episode as the sort of military commander kind of thing, but she's kind of underused. She doesn't really do anything spectacular. She's just your fairly standard military person who's in it for a little bit and then just seemingly is forgotten about, because I know she's not in the second part, I remember that. And as soon as she kind of walks out of the church, her last line is like, "You've got 10 minutes" or something, when the Doctor's about to go and find Osgood, and we just never see her again. There's nothing else said about her, so it would have been nice if she had something else, a little bit more than that, because she's a great actress, and I think she could have had a bit more to work with in this episode, although she was working alongside the most inept unit soldiers you have ever seen, as I will come to in a second. But yeah, so although it's nice to see her again alongside Peter Capaldi, it was a little bit disappointing she didn't have more of a role in the episode, I think, and she didn't really have the chance to fulfil all her ability and potential, if you like, I think, so that's a little bit disappointing, but it's not a major thing, I guess. And of course I should mention, very quick mention to that Harriet Jones reference with Rebecca Front's Colonel Walsh, I think it is, where she says, we know who you are, harking back of course to Harriet Jones' now infamous catchphrase, essentially, that kind of just became a running joke in Doctor Who, didn't it, in the later RTD years when she appeared. Well, she didn't actually appear very often, did she? She appeared in the Slitheen two-parter, Christmas Invasion, and Stolen Earth, and that was it. Wow, I'm sure she appeared in more episodes than that. Okay, well, there we go. But it was nice to have a reference, and of course, because it was 10 years of New Who last year. Just gone past 11 years now, a couple of weeks ago. It was 11 years of New Who. Wow, that's quite remarkable. But yeah, so it was nice. They didn't go over the top with the 10 years of New Who, which I think was right. It would obviously, I think 99.9% of people would have loved a Christopher Eccleston return, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. And so they didn't go over the top with the references. You got a few throughout the series. Obviously, in the first episode, you had the sort of going back to the Maldavari and then Khan, the Shadow Proclamation, and there were just lots of little nods through the episodes, getting references to old characters or things and stuff. In Before the Flood, you get a reference to, I think it's Amy, Martha, and Donna. I think get a quick nod from O'Donnell. Clearly, the Doctor's fan club. If you're in the Doctor's fan club, you have to have your name beginning with O. O'Donnell and Osgood. That just seems to be the way for some reason. And of course you get the Captain Jack mention in The Woman Who Lived, among others. I'm sure there's lots of other references there, just little subtle, just lines, nothing major, but just a nice nod to the fans like us who pick up on these kind of stuff, kind of things. So that was another nice nod for this episode. And well, now I have to pick up on units in this episode. Clearly they are a much bigger part of this episode than when they had their brief appearance in The Magician's Apprentice, all of 6 or 7 minutes, and then they're gone. Off to sort of just disappear out of the story really, whereas this episode they're clearly the main part of most of both parts of the episode. And you've got Kate Stewart back. Kate Stewart's better in this episode, I think it is fair to say. She obviously, although she still makes some poor choices, because obviously she goes off to New Mexico to Truth and Consequences to go and check out what's going on over there, but she took no one with her. She went alone. Surely you would take at least one soldier with you as a little bit of protection. I know she's sort of like unit head or something like that and she had a gun, but even so, you think you'd want to take someone when you go into this dangerous place, no idea what you're going to expect there, and possible Zygons. It would make a little bit more sense to me if she had, but she didn't, and well, that didn't work out too well, did it, at this point in time, until we realise in the second part that actually Kate Stewart is a great character in this episode and does the right thing and actually kills the Zygon, but that's for next week. But in this episode she kind of gives a few explanations at the start. It tells the Doctor what's going on, gets the story started, and then doesn't really do too much other than chilling in Mexico, New Mexico, in Truth and Consequences, just chilling around there and not really doing that all that much, frankly. But we obviously have to come to the rest of Unit. And that scene in Temesistan, the fictional Temesistan, outside the church. I mentioned it before in the Series 9 review when I briefly talked about this episode, but I feel I need to reiterate it, that it is just the most... You just despair. I have to despair at that scene. It's just... have these soldiers never had any sort of military training in their life? I mean, I have no idea about anything military. Nothing at all. I couldn't care less, really, and I don't know anything. But I can work out by using common sense that you don't send every single one of your soldiers into that church when it's there's a very good possibility that they're all Zygons who are about to be killed. And Colonel Walsh is telling them that, and they just all ignore it and walk in because they're the most inept and completely useless soldiers you have ever met. I mean, UNIT clearly train their soldiers so terribly badly nowadays. They just... I mean, they were bad enough with their lack of any aim back in the 70s, because it didn't help them that their bullets didn't work on any aliens, but they were pretty poor back then. But now, they're just devoid of any military tactics whatsoever. They have no idea what they're doing. And it happens twice over as well. They send all their most of their soldiers all down into under London, just to find out there's a trap by Bonnie, and then they all get killed as well. And so we must have lost about 90% of UNIT soldiers in this one episode because they're just stupid, frankly, and they have no idea what they're doing. It doesn't really make any sense. And so it's extremely frustrating that UNIT couldn't be written better. I mean, it's meant to be a nice scene outside the church. Oh, is she actually your mum? Oh, look. Oh, he can't actually kill his mum or something because he'd never be able to do that. But clearly, even if he felt this main soldier, Johnny, it's me, Johnny. Don't shoot Johnny. It's just such a stereotypical name there with an American accent to call him Johnny. And it just... If you're going to send Johnny in, then at least don't send everyone else in at the same time. Even if it's just one soldier you don't send in. You do not send every single soldier in when there's such a good chance they're all going to die. It's just makes no physical sense. Is it meant to be written that badly that they are completely useless? Are they meant to be written as completely stupid? Or is this just poor from Peter Harness? I mean, a lot of the episode's good, and I don't think Kill the Moon's terrible. I think Peter Harness is a good writer. But this scene just didn't work out at all, I think. And it's not good. It's really poor from UNIT. After they seem to be a bit better for a lot of the episode. They were sort of actually doing something somewhat, although do they even fire any bullets in this episode? Do they actually fire a gun at all? I don't think so. They just sort of... Well, they all seem to go into complete frozen mode when they're down under London with all the Zygons appear. And default reaction for a set of soldiers should be open fire on the Zygons and see what happens, because I feel like the Zygons might get hurt by bullets. I can't quite remember. I feel like they have in the past been hurt by bullets, so surely at least one of these 50 soldiers standing there completely frozen would try to shoot their gun rather than just stand there panicking when you're meant to be a soldier. I mean, that's all pretty poor, and so it's disappointing the way UNIT were portrayed in this episode. I mean, they're generally not being portrayed that well at all in New Who, frankly. It's sort of... the writers just haven't really found the right way to use them, I guess, and not just make them as pointless soldiers you can get rid of, dispensable soldiers, I guess, which is kind of what they have become. To some degree with that is in Classic Who as well, but I still think they were used a bit better back then. So it's a disappointing aspect, I guess, for this episode, and a little bit frustrating, but that's the way it is. One other thing, of course, we get another hybrid mention this week, don't we? We get another hybrid joke, of course. Keeping the hybrid meme of the series going with human and Zygon like a hybrid, as the Doctor has to say, because that's ramming the arc home. Hybrids are important, wink wink. We get that yet again, which is not so great, but there you go. Yes. Keeping it in your minds after we've had a mention in this episode 2, episode 5 and episode 7 now. I think there's only 3 mentions in the series, maybe there's more, I can't remember. But there you go, there's another hybrid mention of trying to find out whether Osgood's human or Zygon, and she just says, no, actually I'm both, when you're not both, you're either human or Zygon, so shut up. But we'll never really know, as I said earlier. Well, I should talk about the ending now, the last sort of 5-6 minutes or so, when we get down into the underground under London, the sort of sewer area kind of thing, and we discover this underground Zygon base kind of thing with all these Zygon pods, where Jack initially is a bit stupid. I haven't really mentioned Jack, actually. She's sort of just another UNIT character who's not a soldier. She's kind of an advisory sort of managerial role almost, I guess. She was in The Magician's Apprentice very briefly, of course, had a couple of lines about pardon my sci-fi, but this is not like anything we've seen on Earth or something, I think. And then she returns for this episode, has 40 minutes and then gets killed off because, cool, we don't really care about her too much. I think she was never meant to be written to be the character you care about most. She was just someone to stick with Clara or Bonnie to keep that part of the story going, I guess, that you needed to have someone. And so there you go. That's sort of that part of it. And it was a nice sort of turnaround at the end, although it's fairly obvious with the Zygon Clara. It was nice. A nice moment the way it was done, where the sort of sudden realisation of Jack as the camera sort of pans up to the pods as she's thinking about it, saying it, and it pans back down and zooms in as she slows down her speak. They're not duplicates, they're the originals. Oh dearie me, this has all gone rather wrong. And so we get, obviously, Bonnie's lovely sinister look. Jenna Coleman really pulls off the villain very well in both this episode and the second part. And you've got to love that face that she pulls, this sort of evil face of evil Clara is fantastic. I really like that moment where she turns around and sort of we get a quick recap of where she became a Zygon. Back fairly obviously in the end, really, it should have been obvious to us all that she was actually a Zygon. That gets all turned around, and then all the soldiers, as I mentioned, get killed off, and it all goes a bit disastrous, really. All a bit wrong. It's looking pretty dire state, because then we cut across to Truth and Consequences, where it looks like Kate has just been killed, and the Zygon has taken her form, and maybe she's just been duplicated, just from what we see at that point. You don't really know, but it looks like she's neutralised, let's use that word. And the Doctor's trapped on a plane, about to die. Evil Clara gets her rocket launcher, goes... I remember seeing the filming pictures of that, and well, we kind of all had guesses that it might be a Zygon Clara. I can't remember exactly what the sort of main theory was around that, but he was sort of a promising look. I think a lot of people were hoping it would just be sort of badass Clara doing the getting out a rocket launcher and blowing up a plane, essentially, which would have been a nice step forward for Clara, but it had to be Bonnie doing that, so there you go. And, well, then I feel it's very poorly edited, the ending, actually, because you get where Bonnie fires the rocket, and it flies up, you see it at long shot flying up, and then you cut back to a shot of Bonnie's... I think you cut to the Doctor for about 2 seconds, then you cut back to Bonnie's face, you hear an explosion of the plane exploding, and then it just says to be continued. A much better way of doing that, in my opinion, would have been to have had a close-up shot of the rocket, which they could have followed it up to just before it was about to hit the plane. Could have and just as it's about to hit the plane, then you cut to be continued, because it looks so much more like the Doctor's actually going to be blown up inside the plane. Because obviously the plane blew up and he escaped, so you could have got away with that because it was before he jumped out, so it was all good. And so I think that was fairly poorly done in the end, really. And the music suggests they cut a shot out, because the music of that scene kind of ends after the to be continue has sort of appeared. It sounds like they cut out the last couple of shots for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. It just sort of feels like there's something missing there, that you maybe would have a shot of the plane actually blown up would have been better, I think. And so that was it sort of was I remember watching it first time, and it was sort of a bit of a sudden ending. It was a bit of a jolt. It just sort of suddenly ended with a shot of Bonnie. It kind of was a bit sort of, whoa, it just ended, what happened? And so it was a bit strange there, and, well, a bit disappointing. But it was still a fairly nice cliffhanger, but it obviously was kind of ruined for me by the filming pictures, which showed the Doctor with his Union Jack parachute lying on the beach, which was, well, it took all of 10 seconds to realise, oh, that's how we're going to get out. It's going to parachute out with that Union Jack parachute. So there you go. That took away that cliffhanger. But there you go. That didn't really matter too much to me. I'm sure it was like Peter Hunter and Stephen Moffat said, "Oh, this episode's got a great cliffhanger. It's one of the best ones." But I thought, no, it's not really particularly great, mainly because of the way you edited it. You could have done it a lot better than that. So yeah, it's slightly sort of underwhelming end, I think, just the way it just didn't quite work out for the ending. But it's not a big thing, and clearly it doesn't harm the episode too much, I think. And well, that's near enough everything there is to say on this episode, I think. I think I've pretty much covered all the major plot points, characters, locations, sort of themes and interests of this episode. I think that's, yeah, pretty much covered everything. And I believe I gave it 7.8, something like that. It's just under 8 out of 10, I think. It's definitely better than The Woman Who Lived, but I think it's probably... It's below The Magician's Apprentice and Witch Familiar, so it's at least number 3. I'd stick it below Under the Lake as well, and then it's probably on a par with sort of Before the Flood and The Girl Who Died, so probably about sort of 4th or 5th best so far. Overall it'll become about 8th or 9th. So it's not one of my favourites of the series. It's a solid episode, and it sets up the second part well, but I don't think it's sort of an absolute classic, this part. It's not the most amazing episode ever, if you like, so... But there you go, that's the sort of thing that tends to happen with Doctor Who mid-series. You kind of get these sort of good but not amazing episodes through mid-series. We have that in every series, really. You get sort of Series 8 had The Caretaker and Kill the Moon. Well, Series 7 was full of average episodes, so I won't even go there. And Series 6 is a different situation with the split series, of course. Series 5, you've got the Silurian two-parter, which is fairly average, along with Vampires of Venice, that's pretty average as well. Even going back further, Series 4 is obviously a bit more consistent, and the bad episodes kind of come earlier with Poisons, with the Sontaran two-parter, which is just meh, really meh. And Doctor's Daughter, that's pretty bit average as well. Series 3, Dalek two-parter, that's pretty pants, and Series 2 is just average throughout mainly. The Sidemen two-parter doesn't work, and the Idiot's Lantern is terrible. And well, Series 1 not quite so bad, but the Long Game is a bit meh. So it's generally these series seem to have a bit of a sag mid-series before, at least in my opinion, picking up towards the end. I know a lot of people like to hate on finales because they're going so big that they just can't be good in this kind of stuff. But I really enjoy finales generally, and a lot of season openers. Some of them aren't so good. Partners in Crime, New Earth. Smith and Jones is meh. But yeah, but once Moffat took over, he did opening episodes properly, and that's where it sort of made a difference for me for the series in general. And so you get a sort of drop off, which she had to some degree in Series 9, but it fairly quickly picked up with the Zygon Invasion, and then went with Salute No More. That's going to be a fun review in a couple of weeks' time, isn't it? I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. But there we go. That's this review. I'll stop talking now, and that's all there is to say. Remember to like the video and subscribe if you're new here. Comment what you thought about this episode in general, if you agree with my thoughts, if not, if you thought this was a classic, maybe you really thought it wasn't very good at all. I know some people have said it was pretty bad. I don't think it's that bad, so let me know what you think. And I've been Elliot, I'm EMS Productions, and I'll see you this time next week, hopefully, for another Doctor Who review. Goodbye.